Be Lecture 5.4, Tropical Savannah, the answer to the question that won me the 6th grade Geography B championship at West Grove Elementary. Just like the monsoon and tropical rainforest, it's quite hot here in the Savannah. The only difference is it's a bit drier. The areas of the world that are tropical savannas are the areas that are beige. The previous map, especially in the case of Africa, showcases the fact that the tropical savannas are going to be poleward on both sides of the tropical rainforest. Further, these are going to be areas that have temperature variations that are greater than tropical rainforests. This makes sense because these are going to be areas that have greater variability in their day length, but also have less sun angles during certain times of year than the tropical rainforest. Further, these are areas a lot like tropical monsoons. They're going to have an intense rain period when that ITCZ is overhead, i.e. the equatorial low pressures above them, or they'll have the opposite situation with the dry season, the dry period, when the ITCZ is furthest away. The key to understanding the difference is the fact that the tropical monsoon has a much more intense rain period than the which is clearly evident here when we look at the tropical monsoon on the left and the tropical savanna on the right. You can see that intense wet period. You can see the bar graph essentially going off the graph, whereas on the right it doesn't. But both instances we have that dry period when the subtropical high pressures are over the area, but then they both also have the wet period when the equatorial low pressure trough is above. As I've mentioned before, Africa is pretty much free of any mountains that are going to significantly alter too much of the linear patterns that we would expect based on latitude. So it's very much mirrored on both sides of the continent. So if we draw a line right through the middle, horizontally through the continent, you can see on both sides where the stars are is the location of the tropical savanna. Other things to note as far as the vegetation, it's not as dense green, so you're going to see more variability, and that variability is due to that dry season that doesn't exist inside the tropical rainforest, which I'll showcase here with some photos, with the first being during the dry period. And here we can see during the wet season, obviously a little bit more lush and various animals feeding on things. One of the things is this is the area that we would think of as the African safari. And so this is where you're going to find giraffes and zebras and hippopotamuses and a lot of large migratory animals. We'll look at some examples here on the following images. One characteristic is you see the trees have a kind of a distinctive shape in which their leaves are actually only at the top there. And that's because over time they've been able to resist the frequent drought and then subsequent frequent fires that occur here. And so their leaves aren't going to be impacted by a fire that's only going to take out the things there along the surface, the kind of the brush there closer to the surface. So one of the things you see is over time these trees have adapted to the fact that this has an intense dry period, and if you have a lightning strike during an intense dry period, that's going to be perfect fuel, perfect spark to start at one of these fires that are quite common in this area. Here's an image showing some elephants, and so this is once again going to be evidence of the dry period, but also evidence post-fire. You can see the various carcasses of trees that are all over the surface. Nice, happy group. Zebras getting along with giraffes. And then there's this guy. Hey, buddy. This is an ostrich. This is a large flightless bird. So once again, we have this idea of a large migratory animal residing here in the tropical savanna. This makes sense because during the dry period, these animals are out of here. They're migrating with whatever they feed on. They migrate with changing the seasons, and so they're going to go where there's more vegetation, and they're obviously going to move during the dry period, but then they come back during the wet period. There's a reason why a lot of large migratory animals have essentially dominated this area, and now it makes sense based on climate. Here's evidence of a post-fire, and you can see which ones resisted the fire and which ones did not.